Curtis. Found your dream house, but not your dream rate? Make your purchase with a home loan from Cyprus Credit Union. Refinance within 12 months if rates drop, and Cyprus Credit Union will take care of the refinancing fees.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A little more rain making for wet roads around Foothill, I-80 and I-215's East Belt. Utility work blocking right lanes of travel westbound 4500 south near 500 east. Is your car due for some extra love? Burt Brothers is here for your vehicle's routine maintenance, all done by our ASC certified technicians. Burt Brothers, affordable, complete auto care done better. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, it's going to dry out. Tomorrow's looking like very low chance of precipitation, and the clouds are disappearing as well, and then it'll be dry and sunny and warmer by Monday and Tuesday. Right now we're at 63 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The headlines today, of course, are that Congress has other priorities, so they have left the town with a government shutdown looming. Another U.S. senator has been indicted on bribery charges, taking for himself cash, cars, and gold bars. We've got celebrity breakups of dueling narcissists over millions and millions of dollars. We have smash and grab robberies by greedy gang members. Makes you wonder if selfishness is the new norm in our nation. Or is it? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, there are a lot of negative headlines that might just make you think that selfishness is the new norm in the nation. But that's why we go beyond the headlines, because there's so much more to it and so much more we need to think about or think again about as it relates to where we really are as a country. Really interesting. Recently, there was a lot of chatter and anger about Delta Airlines changing the rules on their frequent flyer programs. Had a lot of people disgruntled, saying they were just being greedy and selfish as an airline. But there was another story that made me think maybe that's not all of the story. This was on NBC News, and an interesting way to kind of look at where we are in terms of, is it really that bad as a nation, or are there still a lot of really good people and organizations that are willing to make something good actually happen? Take a listen.
Michaela Renfro had 4 hours left on a flight home from a European vacation when she got the text of a lifetime.
Michaela, please send an updated ETA when you can. I may need you for Jasmine tonight.
Oh, God! She's currently in the ensemble of Aladdin on Broadway, but she's also the understudy for Jasmine. When she landed, she had 2 hours until curtain call. The problem? Rush hour in New York City.
So you're stuck in the air and there's nothing you can do about that.
I can't just go up to the pilot and knock on the door and be like, can you just drive a little faster, please?
Renfro asked the flight attendant if she could be first off the plane, but Delta Airlines did way more than that.
So we were like, listen, you just relax, hydrate yourself with some water, and leave the rest up to us. If he could land the plane on Broadway, he would have done that for her.
They moved her to first class. They switched gates so the plane would be closer to customs. And they helped her book her own magic carpet ride, a Blade helicopter that would get her from the airport to Manhattan, turning a typically 90-minute trip into one that was merely 7 minutes.
And then you had to completely transform into Jasmine.
Yeah, I had about 15 minutes makeup, 5 minutes hair, 5 minutes put your clothes on, and then 5 minutes to walk down to the stage.
Even her flight attendant made the show.
Can you believe you made it?
No. So it was truly a miracle every step of the way.
Miracle granted. Seems like luck, or maybe a genie, was on her side. Savannah Sellers, NBC News.
Great story by Savannah Sellers there on NBC News. And so there you have it. Michaela Renfro is on a flight from Europe. Suddenly gets the big tap on the shoulder moment. She's been the understudy to be Jasmine in Aladdin on Broadway. She's in the air. So she asked if she can be the first one off the plane, and Delta goes way beyond that. They move her to first class. They get the plane to park at a different gate so it's closer to customs. They helped her get a helicopter so that she could not have to sit in traffic for 90 minutes, 7-minute helicopter flight. Who knew it was just 7-minute helicopter flight into downtown New York, and she made it. She walked on stage as Princess Jasmine, and that's a magical ending. But to me, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and obviously that's a big time example. But there's many more than that. We always hear the selfishness story, but we're way more generous than you think. In fact, our good friend David Brooks had a fantastic piece not too long ago in the New York Times talking about how generous people actually are, not just here in the United States, around the world. And I think it's time to highlight that just a little bit in terms of maybe what we think we know about people being selfish versus how much good actually gets done every single day. It's never in the news. We're really not that selfish. Human beings are pretty extraordinary when it comes right down to it. In fact, there was a fascinating study done. Ryan Dwyer and William Brady did a really interesting study. They did this in 7 countries around the world. They had 200 people in this study. Each of them were given $10,000 free. And the only requirement is in the end, they reported how they spent the money. That was it. And so you might think, they probably selfishly spent it all on themselves. Well, the reality is very different. Out of those 200 people, on average, again, these are people who have received $10,000, they spent an average of $6,400 to benefit others. Well over half. 1,700 of that went to specific donations to charity, again, on average. And really interesting, most of the money went to people who weren't just like friends and family. So it wasn't just being nice to your friends and family. It was people outside of that circle. In fact, over $2,000 was spent on complete strangers. And so when you look at that, you say, okay, there is hope for humanity there, to be sure. And so that was kind of an interesting study. I thought David Brooks pointed that out really well in his New York Times piece. But there's more to the story than that. Because, again, we do get this relentless, steady stream of all the negative things that people do around the world. Why? Because it's news. And it's sensational in many cases. And it points out just how awful, horrible, and selfish people can be. And granted, there are times when people can be awfully selfish, horrible, and terrible. But for the most part, and most people, they're not selfish. They're actually the opposite of that. Another really interesting study that David Brooks pointed out in his piece was that even in organizations, the people who do best in organizations are actually the helpers. The people who do not take a narcissistic, self-absorbed, zero-sum game kind of approach, but those who actually help other people in the organization. The helpers tend to rise in the organization more than the self-centered people do. The ones who are always on the lookout for what they can extract for themselves, the takers, end up being very low-performing workers. The givers, the helpers, tend to rise. They have better networks, more expansive networks, which leads to more opportunities. So really interesting. So you could say, well, they're just doing that to get ahead. So it really is selfish interest. But it really isn't the case. The whole point to me, and the point that David Brooks so powerfully takes out of all of the data, is that while we tend to focus on these folks that are the selfish narcissists, it's very different. David concluded with something I thought was really poignant that I want to get to. He said that in our Western culture, we've really lost this connection. In many cultures outside of the West, people see themselves embedded in a network of material, social, and spiritual care. People give one another a hand. They lend one another an ear. They borrow and lend. And they see these exchanges not as cold zero-sum transactions, but as ongoing supportive and reciprocal relationships. And I think that's the real test. We have a lot of things that point to just living your life as a series of transactions. We see that a lot in our politics, very transactional folks. Used to be built on relationships. Now it's what can you do for me? And as long as you're not doing better than me, because it's a zero-sum game in politics, then that's okay. And that's where the narcissistic, selfish approach gets embedded. And it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So many people are telling us how selfish we are that you start to look for it. And that's what you end up finding. But if we see ourselves differently, if we do give a hand, lend an ear, lend and borrow, and be interconnected, not just a transaction, then everything changes. And I happen to think in this country, we have the most unselfish, most compassionate people on the planet who do more than we ever imagine every single day.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. The Cougars go 3-0.
Keaton throws, end zone, up for the touchdown!
And demonstrate they're ready.
Cougars have won it! And listen to the BYU fans in Fayetteville.
Saturday, the Cougars are on the road again for their Big 12 debut.
Rise and shout!
BYU, Kansas. Our extended pregame coverage starts at 9 with kickoff at 1:30 on Utah's legacy home for BYU football, KSL News Radio.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. With rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system, it is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
Fall is full of festivals and fun in Logan. The first annual Center Street Giant Pumpkin Festival is Saturday, September 23rd. These gargantuous gourds tip the scales at more than 1,500 pounds. The winner of the weigh-off wins cash and the title of Center Street Giant. Watch a professional pumpkin carver at work on a 300-pound pumpkin. There'll be free showings of It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, a family scavenger hunt, activities for kids, pumpkin and harvest-featured foods, a beer garden, music and dancing, and more. Then, it's time for the third annual Free Cache Valley Cheese and Dairy Festival, September 29th and 30th. Free samples, live music, kids' activities, and food trucks. Workshops where you can fine-tune your taste buds for gourmet cheese tasting, make an eye-popping charcuterie board, or taste dark chocolate from around the world. Dutch oven dinner, and so much more. Get a hotel, round up your herd, and head to Logan, Utah to fall in love with fall. ExploreLogan.com. ExploreLogan.com.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Email from school about the incident today.
Scary.
You know, Teachers like me, parents, we don't always know as much as you guys do about what's going on with other kids.
Half the time, it's rumors.
Yeah, but if you're ever concerned about a friend who's having trouble with alcohol, prescription drugs, anything, you need to tell an adult, someone you know and trust. That can be hard, but speaking up about a problem is what helping a friend is all about.
For more information, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for about 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop texts, stopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, 1 man died in a rollover crash on I-80 in Tooele County last night. Second, grass is disappearing in St. George as the city works to conserve water. Third, the United Auto Workers strike expanded today to cover plants in 20 states. Lower pay for new workers is among the things they want to change. 63 and mostly cloudy right now in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson. On Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. I am Boyd Matheson. You know, it seems like we're getting closer and closer to a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That would be historic. The deal goes through, would truly be an amazing agreement and a great achievement, I think, for President Biden, for the administration. Still a long ways to go, lots of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed. Yesterday at the UN, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that they're close to this historic agreement with the Saudis.
The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Such a peace will go a long way to ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. It will encourage other Arab states to normalize their relations with Israel.
Netanyahu went on to praise President Biden and the important role the U.S. is playing in brokering this deal.
2 days ago, I discussed this vision of peace with President Biden. We share the same optimism for what can be achieved, and I deeply appreciate his commitment to seize this historic opportunity. The United States of America is indispensable in this effort. And just as we achieved the Abraham Accords with the leadership of President Trump, I believe we can achieve peace with Saudi Arabia with the leadership of President Biden.
Really important comments there from Bibi Netanyahu there at the United Nations this week. And an important time for Prime Minister Netanyahu because of the fact he has a lot of challenges going on at home. We've been covering it extensively in terms of the proposed changes to the judiciary, the way that's being done. There's a lot of turmoil, protests continuing over the way that separation of powers would undermine the democracy in Israel. So Bibi Netanyahu clearly has an agenda that this could be something very good for him at home as well as around the world, where he's faced a lot of criticism for the proposed changes and how they've been done there in Israel. But this is something that would be historic, and I thought it was interesting that Bibi Netanyahu pointed out that this could be a former President Trump, current President Biden tag team making this all come to fruition. Really interesting. During an interview with Fox News earlier this week, host Brett Baer asked Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman what it would take for relations to be normalized with Israel. Here's the prince's response.
For us, the Palestinian issue is very important. We need to solve that part, and we have good negotiations continue. Till now, we got to see where it will go. We hope that it will reach a place that it will ease the life of the Palestinians and get Israel back as a player in Middle East.
There were reports that you had suspended talks.
No, that's not true.
Not true. So you think, if you were to characterize it, are you close?
Every day we get closer.
Every day they get closer. That's coming from the Saudi crown prince. And this is really historic territory. And there's a really interesting irony in all of this. And that is that a lot of this is being driven by Iran. Now you may think, well, wait a minute. What does Iran have to do with all of this? Yesterday we had Jonathan Schanzer from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And we talked about the Iran hostage deal, how it had angered Israel and it had angered Saudi Arabia. And it also makes a Saudi-Israel deal a little more likely.
It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm sure that the Saudis and the Israelis, and we know that they have quiet conversations, away from the spotlight. I'm sure they're complaining to each other about what the Biden administration has just done and how it's going to make them less safe. But as they are talking about how they are less safe, they see the need to work together even more closely. And so therein lies the paradox of all of this. I think the Biden administration probably figured that it could get away with this because it would only draw these two sides closer.
That was a real think again moment for me yesterday. It's what I love about doing this show. I always get my own think again moments. I had not connected all of those dots, that there was so much criticism about the Biden administration trading 5 Americans for 5 Iranians plus $6 billion in frozen assets being moved back to Iran. Of course, the criticism was all about what Iran would use that money for. Would it be for more state-sponsored terrorism? Would it be for their nuclear program? And so all of that is really interesting. And so the paradox, the think again moment from Jonathan yesterday was, oh my goodness, this is actually helping Israel and Saudi Arabia realize that they have to defend themselves against Iran. And it might be a good thing for them to do that together rather than apart. Fascinating stuff. Jonathan also went on to say that the Biden administration is clearly playing with fire in making deals with Iran because this may not be a sustainable thing and it may actually lead to more problems in the Middle East.
The Iranians are getting dangerously close to that dash to a bomb potentially. They continue to thumb their noses at the international community. And by the way, the president of Iran just got up at the UN and just excoriated the United States. Even after the U.S. released those $6 billion, you get a sense we're on a collision course here. And if the U.S. isn't careful and the Iranians do have that breakout, this administration will lose the Israelis and the Saudis. They'll lose the entire Middle East. It will really look as if the U.S. has lost a handle on that American-led world order that it keeps touting as it seeks to counter the rise of an aggressive Chinese Communist Party.
So interesting to break all of that down. And that is the part where I agree with Jonathan. The Biden administration is clearly playing with fire. If Iran breaks through and does end up with a nuclear fact, that day after, not even 24 hours after, President Biden had signaled that they were going to release and unfreeze this $6 billion in frozen assets, that the president of Iran at the United Nations, on U.S. soil, by the way, just excoriates the United States. And so clearly there's no relationship there. So I think we need to be very careful in our assessment of what we're doing with Iran. This is much more transaction stuff. This is not relation stuff. I do think we have relationships with the Saudis and with Israel. And we better be careful that we don't sell out in the idea to ratchet down and appease Iran, that we end up losing our real friends and allies in the process. And so it is a very ironic moment that things that were so criticized by the administration may actually be nudging Israel and Saudi Arabia a little closer to some pretty historic agreements. And we'll continue to follow all of that. And again, big thanks to Jonathan Schanzer, who helped us out with that yesterday. We look forward to having him back on the program as well. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up on KSL News Radio. Stick around.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour: police were justified in opening fire on a corrections officer back in November, according to the Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill.
This was a long, drawn-out process. He had threatened at least 2 civilians with the handgun, ostensibly, and he had failed to stop on 3 occasions. And when he jumped out with the handgun in his hand.
The shooting followed a police call from a woman saying she was being held hostage. That led to a pursuit in South Jordan. The suspect, Zachary Alvarenga, was killed. A police canine named Maya was also killed. A rainstorm rolled through Salt Lake County and northward in the early hours of this morning, with as much as half an inch of water dropping in some areas. The mountaintops weren't left out. They even got a few inches of snow, and that dusting will get melted through the day. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. A big step forward for people affected by the deadly wildfire on Maui. People who lost their homes are now being allowed to go back into the neighborhoods to look at what's left. ABC's Alex Stone reports.
For a month and a half, people who lived in Lahaina have been unable to get in to see the remains of their homes. Today, they can line up for re-entry passes, and they'll be allowed to go in on Monday. Maui Emergency Management Head Daryl Oliveira.
Getting them into their properties so they can have closure.
Previous attempts to let residents back in haven't worked, but now the Maui government says it's ready to let families in to grieve and to show insurance adjusters what's left. Alex Stone, ABC News.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average back into positive territory, up 41 points right now. The NASDAQ up about 63 points. And our KSL weather, in addition to melting the snow, we're going to warm things up a little bit through the weekend. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Call the pros at Yes and take $50 off any heating, cooling, plumbing, or electrical system repair over $200. Get fast relief and $50 off any repair from Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. The same great people providing the same great service that Utah has counted on for more than 45 years. Visit theyesmancan.com to schedule your appointment.
We're going abroad for the first time in years, to Spain. So we started using Babbel.
And started learning Spanish fast.
With Babbel, you can start having conversations in another language in just 3 weeks.
¿Cómo te llamas?
¿Cómo te llamas?
When you learn a language, you want to actually use it. Babbel is designed with that goal in mind.
In just 3 weeks, we're starting to have conversations in Spanish. Gracias, Babbel.
Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free at Babbel.com. That's BABBEL.com.
Hi, friends. Dan, the Laptop Man here from PC Laptops. I get a lot of emails with feedback from customers. Here's one. Dear Dan, I just had the best experience ever. I bought a computer from Shane at your State Street store. I asked several what I thought were really stupid questions. Shane was super courteous and made me feel comfortable through the whole process. People need to understand how important it is to support a local company, especially when your experience is so good. PC Laptops really does love me. Signed, Satisfied. I love hearing feedback like that. It really just gives me the chills. It's the whole reason why I got into the computer business in the first place. You can get a brand new PC Laptops desktop, and they start at only $29 a month. And it comes with a lifetime warranty. That means if anything goes wrong, we're going to take care of you. Just check us out at PCLaptops.com. That's PCLaptops.com. At PC Laptops, we really do love you.
Get Mr. Max Performance Missionary Package. 1 performance suit, 4 and collar stretch shirts, 3 ties, 1 mission belt, and 1 pair of Echo or Johnston & Murphy shoes. Just $595.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Rain in parts of the valley and along I-80 in Parley's Canyon. And that's where we have our latest accident. There's a lot of spray coming up off the roadway with the moisture. Eastbound I-80 about a mile after Lambs Canyon. All vehicles have been moved over to the left shoulder. Also a crash called out at State and 1700 South. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, the showers are done, so we'll dry out through the weekend with highs in the 70s. Overnight lows will drop into the 40s. It'll be warm and sunny for Monday and Tuesday. And right now, we're at 61 degrees and partly cloudy. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson. On Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
A new Gallup poll found that Gen Z has very little trust in our institutions. This is part of a broader trend of growing distrust among Americans in everything from Congress to the Supreme Court. But the level of distrust among young people is particularly striking. The question is, do our institutions need to change in order to regain that trust? What does that look like? It is always a good day when Sam Abrams joins us. He's a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a professor of politics and social science at Sarah Lawrence College, which is the ultimate laboratory to figure out all of this Gen Z stuff. And Sam, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Put a smile on my face. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's take a look at this. And I want to get your sense, not just from what the numbers are telling us in terms of this lagging amount of trust and deteriorating levels of trust of Gen Z and what you're actually experiencing in the classroom. Kind of give us the numbers. What does that tend to look like broadly? And then let's get to your experience.
Sure. Well, it's actually not surprising to me whatsoever that we see these low levels of trust among Gen Zers. And I think the reason for this is that they've grown up in a period of incredible polarization, incredible dysfunction, right? So they have never seen what a small government, system can do and what a good government system can do. Now, globally, we're in good shape. Locally, as a nation, not so much. None of these students remember Ronald Reagan. None of them remember small government that's responsible, that's there to help lift people up. They see lumbering government, they see dysfunctional government, they see anger, they see inefficiency. So when you ask them what's going on, this should not be a surprise at all. They distrust it, they dislike it, they're unhappy with it. And we live in a world with general declining institutions well outside government, right? So we've talked a lot about faith and religion and all of this. These Gen Z, Americans, not just students, but Americans, have grown up in a world where family as an institution has declined, the church and faith has declined, and now our government is in decline. It's inefficient. It's polarized. We're not getting anywhere. They're upset. They're frustrated, and these numbers reflect that.
And so as you look at those numbers, and again, I think we have seen that across the board. You throw in big business into that as one more level of dysfunction and reason to distrust. It's interesting that one of the things that the Gen Zers tend to be grasping onto is science. I was really kind of surprised at some of the numbers there in terms of this big increase in terms of their trust in the science, but their distrust in almost everything else.
Yes, so that's something we see with our students all the time as well. So they like the idea of reason and, the scientific method. And this is why when you teach, if you say, look, let's talk about things reasonably and rationally as opposed to emotionally, our students suddenly become far less political. So they like the idea of some form of scientific reason. Where it gets muddled very quickly is when the science becomes politicized. We can talk about COVID and how we reacted to COVID, and was there good science? And in many cases, there was not good science, as we've talked about. So when science obviously becomes politicized, they dislike it. But by itself, it's one of the few things that they do trust and can trust, because they say, look, there's proof, and for a lot of them, 1 and 1 still equals 2. Obviously, I'm referring to the movement where people don't think 1 and 1 is 2, but no, 1 and 1 is 2, and they certainly understand that and appreciate that. And again, it's reflected in the data. What's again so hard for me is for them to come to class and to see them around the country when I speak, and to just talk to them casually, and you realize they don't know what it's like to see a government that's hopeful, that promotes the individual, that promotes business, all of the stuff that I grew up in the 80s seeing and attracted me to working in politics and working in this sort of space. They have no knowledge and no direct experience with it.
Yeah, I've been dying to get your perspective on this. Our good friend Yuval Levin has talked about kind of the rot in institutions being a function of this shift from organizations or institutions being formative, institutions that shape character, to becoming performative, which is almost the only thing we're seeing in our politics and in our institutions of government these days. How do you see that playing out, and where does that leave us in terms of that kind of crisis of confidence and that lack of trust?
So I wish you could see my head right now. I'm shaking my head the entire time in agreement. So my AEI colleague, Yuval, I think is absolutely right. And this shift occurred in the late 70s, early 80s, where institutions used to say, we're going to develop men and women. I used to be in the Scouts, and in the Scouts, they taught values, they taught ideas. And then in the 70s or 80s, it shifted radically to we're no longer going to have people on the ground. We're no longer going to use bodies. We're going to shift to, and this sounds anachronistic, but a check or, writing organization.
Yeah.
For younger listeners, we don't use checks, of course. It's Zelle or what have you. But the idea is that we send money, and it's performative. We pay money to various groups to say this is what we believe in, and they lobby for us, and they sort of express our values, but they don't help shape our values. And even among a lot of religious institutions, Utah being an exception, incidentally, the religious institutions are afraid to take positions on here is what a family looks like, here's what femininity looks like, masculinity looks like, fatherhood may look like, and so on. So I think Yuval's absolutely right. And again, that's another facet to why there's no trust. These folks, especially Gen Z, they have a very arm's length relationship with institutions, if even that level of intimacy with them. They don't work with them. They're just these amorphous things in the distance, but they're not part of something. They're not part of a group. And I mention that because we've talked a lot about isolation, and this is the loneliest group of Americans as well. So they're lonely because they have no institutions. There's no socialization. They don't trust them. So it's this very sad circular sort of position we're in right now.
Yeah, that downward spiral is dangerous. And I keep coming back, and I'd love your perspective on this, Sam, that I keep saying, we've stress tested our nation in so many different circumstances. World war, economic collapse, pandemic. We've stress tested it in all of those different circumstances, but we've never really stress tested it in the absence of trust. And this downward spiral that you're describing, this lonely crowd, so to speak, to me puts us in that space where we're about to stress test this nation in the absence of trust, and that worries me. How do you see that?
So I think we've had trust issues before. It's just never been in the situation where we have mass media and social media. There were very big issues of trust in the 1860s and, earlier. Again, though, the damage you could do was far smaller, just because you couldn't mobilize and send out a video and have it viewed millions of times within seconds. So we are in unknown territory here, and it is quite a bit scary. I hate to be pessimistic. I'm usually optimistic, so I'm not going to be at this moment, unfortunately, because we need leaders across the board. They can be political leaders, religious leaders, they can be community leaders, school leaders, in fact. Parents who step up and say, we need to do better. We need to recreate community to sort of bolster against this. And I'm not usually optimistic that there are people who are going to step up and do it. And that's not something I'd like to say. I'm very upset even saying that, especially on the radio, right? But I worry about that because I look at the landscape and say, where are the people who are going to promote civility and unity? Now, unity doesn't mean agreement. It just means unity around a certain set of principles, whether it's open inquiry or how we deal with our neighbors. And, we are at a loss for that. In New York City, where I'm standing right now, even our mayor does not promote unity. Look at how he talks to various folks. It's a very aggressive, combative approach. And that scares me. And I'm sorry for being so pessimistic as we go into the weekend on that. But I think you hit the nail on the head. We need some voices to emerge, and we need those voices to emerge quickly. And I think they can, but I just can't tell you who they are or where they're going to come from.
Yeah, and I think I'm the thing that gives me hope is that I think most of them are going to come out of your classroom or my neighborhood. Because I remain optimistic that it is community and culture that lead, and ultimately the politicians and the others will actually follow. And so as you look at what's happening in the classroom, let's pivot to that optimistic path in terms of I do think there will be some leaders emerge, but we've got to keep calling, and we have to create space for leaders to say, oh, I can actually lead. This is not just performative politics stuff. I can actually go and make a difference and have a voice around the principles, as you said. The policy part we can have great debate about, but let's get to the set of principles we can govern around. And so talk to me. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. And I do see that happening. The problem is it's going to be slow and it's going to take time. That's the problem. When you have the right sort of teacher or moderator in the room, the students light up. They love the debate. They love to articulate their views, and especially Gen Zers, they want to see the meat and they want to see the conflict, and how to then work through those sort of conflicts. So there are groups, and one of my favorite is a group called Braver Angels, and they're all over the country. They work with college students and college campuses all the time to showcase how to lead through diverse issues, how to find common ground, and again, I would push to find some shared set of values that we can all build off of. And it's working, although, this is going to take a very long time. It may take more than, 1 or 2 years here. This could be a decade-long building process to seed this sort of movement and to showcase that it can actually work. So the problem is, can we build fast enough while other forces are seeking to tear it down? Yeah. And that's the concern. But I do think a great hope is going to come out of Gen Z. They certainly see themselves a little differently that way.
Yeah.
And with the right leadership, I'm hoping that the institutions can be rebuilt.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the whole key. We can't change this overnight, but we can start today to create space for both those leaders and to create opportunities for our younger people to step into that and experience it. It is one of those things Gen Z and I think the rest of the country don't know how to ask for it. But as you described it, Sam, when they experience it, it's like oxygen. It's like, oh, yeah, I want to be part of that conversation. And we just need more spaces like that where we can have that kind of conversation. Sam Abrams, non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, professor of politics and social science at Sarah Lawrence College, always someone who gives us extraordinary perspective. And I hope that gives all of us something really significant to think about as we roll into the weekend. We all have a role to play in this and create space for those kinds of conversations. Sam, thanks so much for making time for us today.
Thank you for having me, as always.
All right. Great perspective as always. Love having Sam Abrams on the show. He is one of the great thinkers. He's one of the great teachers in our country, and he is creating space for those kind of conversations in the classroom at Sarah Lawrence College. That's good for the Republic. All right. We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
Even before the pandemic, 1 in 5 American adults experience some form of mental illness, depression, suicide, prescription opioid misuse. Utah isn't immune to our share of challenges, but there is hope. We need to take action to keep our loved ones safe. That's why KSL has teamed with the University of Utah Huntsman Mental Health Institute to bring you hope and help you thrive. It's Healthy Mind Matters. Find out more at healthymindmatters.com.
We've been talking a lot about trust today, how important that is. Well, I'll tell you a group you can trust. Hercules Credit Union. They've been doing high-quality financial services for the community since 1946, and I love the community-centered approach to all of this. It's all about growing stronger together, and they have an extraordinary opportunity for you right now. Open up a checking account with Hercules Credit Union, qualify for their gold tier status within the first 90 days, and they'll deposit $200 into your account. That's a good thing. It also comes with all kinds of wonderful benefits of being a gold tier checking member. You get ID theft protection, travel benefits, cellular care coverage, and a host of other benefits that are just absolutely amazing. Open up a checking account at Hercules, qualify for gold tier checking status, and do that in the first 90 days. $200 goes into your account. You can check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, or Salt Lake City. And as always with our friends at Hercules Credit Union, you can find them online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council. Looking for fabulous food, atmosphere, and tradition? Make your reservation at Five Alls Restaurant today. The perfect place for a romantic dinner, birthday, or anniversary celebration. You'll love dining at the Five Alls.
Home is your sanctuary, or is it? If you're tired of yard work, too much space to clean over multiple levels, listen up. Start enjoying home a little more with Nielsen Homes' newest single-level townhomes. Move-in ready without the thought of tedious yard work and close to all the things you love and enjoy. Nielsen Homes offers spacious single-level open floor plans without stairs or yard work and a lower 5.5% interest rate. Nielsen Homes has been building homes across the Wasatch Front for over 45 years. They understand all stages of life and build homes to accommodate the things you need, paired with things you love. See their newest single-level living community in Davis and Weber County, close to golf, pickleball, and more. It's low-maintenance luxury single-level living. No stairs, no more lawnmowers, no yard work, no waiting, and no high interest rates. Visit Nielsen Homes Communities at nielsenhomes.com. Call 385-389-1160. Online at nilsonhomes.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Salt Lake County's district attorney says a shooting involving 8 police officers last year was justified. Second, the Wasatch Front got a good bit of rain overnight. The mountains even had a few inches of snow. And third, people who lost their homes in the wildfire on Maui will finally be allowed back in to look at what's left of their neighborhoods. Right now, 61 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Well, it is that time every week. At this time, we go with our Inside Sources and an inside look at the presidential race. As always, as we look at the different candidates, we remind you that trying to understand the behavior of someone running for president is like trying to smell the color 7. Sometimes it gets pretty difficult to figure out what's going on. Candidates have been hard on the campaign trail this week, trying to qualify for the next debate. It's on the 27th, coming up at the Reagan Library. A big night for many of these candidates. A chance for them to present themselves as the best alternative. The former president, of course, is skipping the GOP debate once again. Instead, he's going to be campaigning in Michigan and supporting the United Auto Workers in their strike. That will be an interesting thing to get into as we roll into next week. This week, however, Chris Christie was probably the most vocal of the candidates in terms of really staking out some space where he intends to lead and his assessment of where we are as a country and where we are in terms of government. He recently appeared on Fox News with Neil Cavuto, gave his thoughts on the looming government shutdown and the battle over funding the government.
It's a failure by everybody involved, Neil. If we shut down the government, you're sent down there to operate the government, not to shut it down. And so you've got to find a way to get it done. We've got to recognize that we're in divided government. And in divided government, you're not going to get everything that you want. But everybody gets an F if it turns out you close down the government. That's not what they're there to do. They're there to solve problems, not create more.
So pretty blistering criticism for both sides of the political spectrum from Chris Christie. He also elaborated on his comments that both the former president, Donald Trump, and the current president, Joe Biden, were past their sell-by date. He said it's not a comment on age. Rather, it's a focus on the conduct of both men.
So, for instance, Joe Biden's now 80 years old. When you fall asleep sitting across from the Israeli president in the Oval Office while there's a whole camera spray in front of you, that shows you're no longer up to the job. Also, the various fictional stories he tells. And Donald Trump is past his sell-by date temperamentally. In 2016, he said, "I am your voice." In 2023, he's now saying, "I am your retribution." We do not need a president who believes the presidency is to be used for retribution. That's why they're both past their sell-by date. It's not a number, Neil. It's the way you act. It's your conduct.
Conduct being the big issue there. Pretty striking, pretty stirring comments there from Chris Christie related to both the former president and the current president. Nikki Haley, on the other hand, has been campaigning in New Hampshire. Yesterday, she gave her thoughts in front of a crowd about the former president, where he went right for the country and where he fell short.
My thought will be that he was the right president at the right time. He broke things that needed to be broken. He listened and brought in a group of people who felt unheard, like where I grew up, rural South Carolina. He was thin-skinned and easily distracted. He didn't do anything on fiscal policy and really spent a lot of money, and we're all paying the price for it. He used to be good on foreign policy, and now he has started to walk it back and get weak in the knees when it comes to Ukraine. A terrible thing happened on January 6th, and he called it a beautiful day, and in the eyes of America, it was a terrible day.
So I think it's a pretty strong approach from Nikki Haley in terms of all of those who are running to be the alternative to the former president. While criticizing some of the things that he did do, she talked about the reckless spending that we're all paying for in terms of $33 trillion in national debt, which, of course, is both a Democratic and Republican administration problem. Both sides are guilty of ratcheting up the spending when they were in power. She said the former president had some good moments on foreign policy and now seems to be a little weak in the knees when it comes to a lot of those foreign things. And so, again, kind of a similar message in terms of, hey, good on some policies, really bad on others, and that's why it's time for change. Now, the next day, Nikki Haley gave a speech at St. Anselm College, where many of the candidates go there in New Hampshire to give a speech on the American economy. She talked about deregulation as one of her top concerns and returning power currently held at the federal level back to the states.
Public service is a privilege, not a right. And no one has a right to roll back your freedoms. I'll force Congress to vote on every rule and regulation, period. When politicians have to vote on every price-hiking, job-destroying, family-crushing mandate, you can bet we'll see a lot fewer rules coming down. And we'll reduce the size of the federal government by pushing programs and authority back to the states. Think welfare, healthcare, education, infrastructure.
I think that was the best part of Nikki Haley's speech there this week, because I think those are things that we often don't really consider. When we talk about regulatory reform, or we talk about the cost of regulation, what that costs businesses, which in turn gets passed on to consumers, to all of us as citizens, that's where things really change. And the most interesting part of all of that many of us don't recognize is that most of those rules and regulations are not being passed by Congress. Most of them are being decided within agencies in the executive branch. Not people who are elected, not people you can vote out, not people you can call on the phone and say, hey, that's really hurting my business, or hey, that's really raising our prices. Those are people that are kind of beyond that kind of accountability and transparency. Now, the problem does begin with Congress, because Congress will pass sweeping bills that have a lot of holes in them. If you ever want to have an interesting exercise, just go read through some of the bills that are on the floor of the House or the Senate. And what you will discover when you read through the bills, you'll find paragraphs that will say, we hereby bequeath the ability to decide what this rule is, what the penalties are for violating, and any retribution to the agency. And there'll be pages and pages of that where Congress will just abdicate their authority to the agency. Everyone passes the bill, everybody cheers, but then there's no accountability. And so then when constituents complain, members of Congress can just shrug their shoulders and say, hey, I just passed the bill. If you have a problem with the details, you're going to have to go talk to the agency, whatever agency it is. So what Nikki Haley is saying is, in a Haley administration, she would force Congress to have to vote on all of those rules and regulations that go to the agencies. So then there would be some transparency. There would be some accountability. They'd have to figure out the details before they just pass the bill. Everybody cheers and goes home for the weekend. Really important stuff. So a lot happening on the campaign trail. And again, all eyes will be moving towards the Ronald Reagan Library on the Republican side, where they will have a debate on the 27th. And the stage might be a little smaller, be a few fewer candidates on there, which will create some interesting space for someone else to emerge. Well, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but don't go anywhere. Much more coming up in hour number two on Inside Sources right here on KSL News Radio.
KSL KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen at home on any smart speaker and in your car at 102.7 FM. This is KSL News Radio, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour, BYU Cougars headed to Kansas for their first Big 12 conference matchup. KSL News Radio's Eric Cabrera has more.
Hot off their win against Arkansas, the Cougars hope to take that W on the road. BYU insider Mitch Harper shared his thoughts on how the teams stack up together.
I think that BYU's in a spot where, I think they match up pretty well. I think both Kansas and BYU are very similar in terms of their styles, kind of gritty teams statistically.
And you can hear all the action here on KSL News Radio, beginning with our extended pregame coverage at 9 a.m. Representative John Curtis says members of Congress shouldn't get paid if the government shuts down. He's introducing legislation to make that happen.
It also makes sure that there's no back pay for Congress so that we go through the shutdown and then go back and pay ourselves back. It's called the no work, no pay.
In a quick Instagram video, Curtis says the shutdown seems imminent. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The Los Angeles County Sheriff is testing a device that will allow drivers to speak with an officer as soon as they're pulled over. Safe Stop will connect the driver to the deputy before he or she approaches the car. Those who are willing to try it will also get a break on traffic fines. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down right now 106 points on the day, and the NASDAQ is down about 12. Our KSL weather, the weekend will just get warmer and sunnier. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
Hey guys, Alex and Scott for Alpine Home Medical. You've heard us talking about and singing the praises of Alpine Home Medical for years, because if you're talking about getting home medical supplies, these are the folks who are going to do it for you at the best price. They're local. They know how to treat their customers. Scott, we've had a lot of experiences with the folks at Alpine Home Medical over the years.
And they really do know how to treat you, because it can be a scary thing. You go online, you don't know what to get. You're not sure about things. You walk in the store and they're going to take care of you from the minute you get there. You're going to sit down with a professional. They're going to work through your insurance. They're going to get you the right supplies for yourself. I have a CPAP machine. I've been in, I've done this, and they're incredible, but it's not just when you're in the store, it's after you leave. They're going to take care of you, call, make sure everything's just right. These medical devices are important, and you want to feel safe, and you want to feel secure, and you want to feel you got the right thing to take care of yourself.
It's everything, too. The power scooters, the CPAP machines, any home medical supplies, they're going to be able to take care of you. And they've got great news. Brand new store in Tooele. They've been trying to expand to Tooele for years, and then here they are now. Go to alpinehomemedical.com to find a location near you. We're excited to see you out there in Tooele, folks. alpinehomemedical.com.
I'm a big believer in investing into what the wealthiest people in the world invest into. But it's not easy to know exactly what that is, and it hasn't always been possible for regular folks like you and I. But that's changing. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, and if you've done a good job acquiring some assets, now is the time to consider private equity. Private equity is ownership of private companies that aren't traded on the stock market and in most cases are very exclusive. Examples could include ownership of apartments or nursing homes, dental practices, solar farms, you name it. Why do so many billionaires invest into private equity? Because of historically low correlation to the stock market and historically higher returns. If you have a goal with your portfolio but aren't there yet, call Trajan Wealth today. Call 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600.
Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. May require accreditation.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article or sensitive personal information about your family? Search engines don't always get it right. For right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. One of the most trusted names in online reputation repair, Reputation Defender has been fixing people's search results for over 15 years. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff so that it rises to the top, helping you put your best foot forward. Your good name is too valuable to leave to the whims of a Google algorithm. Take control with Reputation Defender. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 800-401-6681 to speak to an expert. That's 800-401-6681.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Crews on the scene of this accident in Parley's Canyon, eastbound to I-80. It's about a mile east of Lambs Canyon. It is over to the left, and we're seeing just a little bit of slowing in the immediate area. Even that is partly due to the rain coming down and soaking the road in Parley's. Found your dream house, but not your dream rate? Make your purchase with a home loan from Cypress Credit Union. Refinance within 12 months if rates drop, and we'll take care of the refinancing fees. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather looks like we'll see the showers pretty much wrap up for the Wasatch Front. We are seeing some of the mountains right now. But we'll dry out through the weekend with highs in the 70s and overnight lows drop into the 40s. It'll be warm and sunny for Monday and Tuesday. And right now, 61 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, the headlines, of course, have continued to point out that Russia is having a difficult time having enough soldiers to continue their fight and their invasion into Ukraine. And as they look for more recruits and look at who they can have on those front lines, interestingly, some of them don't speak Russian because they're from Cuba. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, obviously, the struggle and slog for Vladimir Putin has become pretty difficult as he's tried to continue to wage this war against Ukraine. And looking at how he continues to have enough troops to actually prosecute the battle has been one of great debate and concern. One of the interesting things that has emerged beyond the headlines is where Vladimir Putin is willing to go to find people to fight. A fantastic piece in Time. Vera Bergengruen, Vera, is a Washington correspondent at Time magazine, and Vera has a great piece talking about how Russia is actually recruiting Cubans to fight in Ukraine. Vera, welcome to the program, and give us some insight there.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So I think this first came out when the Cuban government released a pretty bizarre statement earlier this month, and they were saying that they had found a human trafficking ring run by Russians that was taking young Cubans, and they were ending up in the Ukraine war. And, that made headlines around the world. People just kind of were mostly disposed to believe it. People were saying the Russians were basically human trafficking Cubans to go there. But the more I dug into it, the more it was pretty clear to me that, first of all, it was much bigger than a small number of people being apparently smuggled over. And also that, the people were going willingly. They were being offered quite a lot of money for Cuba. And the more I kind of started digging into their social media profiles and kind of trying to figure out what's going on, I noticed that it was a much larger operation than it seemed to be. And in a much more formal operation than it seemed to be, because, if you actually look at the documentation, it seems like a pretty, like a pretty formal process that both the Russian and the Cuban government seem to be aware of.
Yeah, and let's dig into that in terms of what that process really looked like. So, again, there were the reports that it was kind of human trafficking, that they were taking these young men and sending them off into Ukraine. But again, it was much more an organized recruiting effort. So describe how that played out. What did you actually find in terms of how sophisticated this process was?
Sure. I mean, you have to remember, obviously, that Cuba is in a very desperate situation. There's a really bad hunger crisis. There's medicine shortages. There's, people really are struggling to survive. And so these Facebook ads started appearing. Cubans tend to be on Facebook a lot, on social media. There's kind of a digital black market where they sell everything from cell phone parts, medicine, meat, anything they can find. And so there's these massive online communities, and these ads started appearing, and they were, they weren't really misleading people. They were straight up saying, you can make $2,000 a month, if you enlist in the Russian military, we'll help you get there, and you will fight there for a year. You can get citizenship for yourself and your family if you want. And, it was presented as a contract, as a pretty formal thing. And, it seems like a lot of people took them up on that offer. And I spoke to a couple of them, and especially to their families, and they said that, there was one woman that struck me. There was one name that kept coming up over and over again, a Russian woman who seemed to speak Spanish and who several people told me had built a lot of trust in both Cuban communities abroad and in Cuba as a travel agent. And she kind of seemed to be the main connector. And, people would go, they would they would get a flight to Russia. Russia started operating direct flights with their airline to a beachside town in Cuba. And once they got there, they were greeted at the airport by, Cuban soldiers who were already there. They were taken somewhere. They signed a very formal 6-page contract that I saw in Spanish, perfectly translated. And they were taken for 4 weeks of training. And then, a lot of them did end up in Ukraine. And during this whole process, they were communicating with their families back home. Their families were openly saying, Juan Carlos is in Russia. He's training. It wasn't a secret, is my point. And that was kind of what the Cuban government had implied.
Wow. And so what are the numbers like? What do we know? What do we suspect in terms of how many have actually ended up there in Ukraine?
So it's really hard to know. The way I was able to confirm this is there's a Ukrainian hacker group that has been hacking into Russian officials' emails. And, they've already successfully hacked into some Russian politicians' emails. And in this case, they hacked into recruiters' emails. And this was just the recruiters in one town in Russia, about a couple of hours from Moscow. And so that one point had over 200 Cubans, go through, enlist, and go off to training. And these 200 passports I personally reviewed and matched to social media profiles enough to really be able to ascertain they're likely real. And those were 200, again, in one town. These flights, are over 200 people per flight. They're going several times a week. And so, it's hard to know. But again, we're definitely talking in the hundreds, and several human rights organizations have been saying they're in the thousands.
Oh, fascinating stuff. Now, talk to us a minute. You pointed this out in your piece in Time, which is such a great reporting, and the way you structured it all is just so powerful. Talk to us about what this means for Cuba. Obviously, they're struggling on the international front. They've had 60 years of U.S. embargo and sanctions. Clearly, Russia is the kind of the odd group out internationally. So how is Cuba navigating all of this?
Yeah, I think we forget sometimes just, what a bad position Cuba is in when it comes to these things. I mean, Cuba's under the 60-year embargo from the United States. They can't, they struggle. If you've ever seen photos of Havana, I mean, everything's just crumbling. They can't import basic things. Again, there's a massive hunger crisis. And the only country that's really been kind of helping them, especially recently, has been Russia. And so Russia is, providing them, has signed all these deals, especially lately, to provide them with grain, with oil. They've been sending people to invest. All these Russian businessmen have been popping up, buying up land. And so, they can't really afford to take off Russia at this point. But if they, their second biggest investor and sometimes their first biggest trading partner is the European Union, which obviously strongly stands overall behind Ukraine. And so they've been walking this very fine line, kind of everyone knows that they are a Russian ally, but at the same time, they can't say that directly, and they definitely cannot be seen sending mercenaries willingly to Russia. That would really be a big problem. And Ukraine has been calling the European Union to break off their trade relationships with Cuba over this. And so what they're basically doing is giving a lot of conflicting statements, which is pretty common of Cuban politics and statecraft. They tend to just kind of give conflicting statements and hope people forget about it.
Wow. Give us just a really quick snapshot, because I want to make sure we keep to the human component to all of this, that these young men that are heading over there, where do they really end up? Obviously, the perils of war are the perils of war, but are they also just kind of stuck in a no man's land in the end, either way, even if they do survive?
That's right, because now Cuba, in order to kind of keep up appearances, has been saying they're cracking down on this alleged human trafficking and on the people who are doing this, and that, you can get 30 years in prison or even the death penalty for fighting for a hostile state and for enlisting. And so basically what's happening is all these people who clearly believed that they were doing something that was sanctioned by the Cuban government, or at least they weren't going to get punished, are now stuck in Russia because if they come back, they're going to get 30 years in prison, and they're unlikely to be able to go back and see their families. And so it still remains to be seen what happens there, but that definitely wasn't something they were expecting.
Yeah, and then final thought, what else are you watching as you see this all unfold? Anything else that you're kind of keeping your eye on that this might be interesting tipping point either for Cuba or for Russia or for how the United States intersects those dots?
It's a big question. There's definitely a lot of things going on at the same time. I do think, as you pointed out, I think earlier, this really shows how desperate Russia is for people to go into their armed forces. You know, they really are increasingly depleted. It's harder to bring people in. You know, they had the Wagner group, mercenary group for a while, bringing in convicts. Now they are kind of out of the equation. They've offered all these incentives to foreign fighters. And so I do think that, you know, the fact that they're leaning now so heavily on this ally to just basically just provide them with cannon fodder really does say something about where Russia's at that particular point.
Yeah, great writing, fantastic reporting. Vera Bergengruen, senior Washington correspondent at Time Magazine. Great piece, Vera, and thank you very much for joining us. A fantastic perspective.
Thank you so much.
It really does show the desperation of Vladimir Putin. And as Vera pointed out, a lot of times these young Cubans really are just cannon fodder. They're just the ones they're sending in there in that very close fighting, the hand-to-hand, direct contact kinds of things. Not good for anyone, but it does show exactly where they are. It shows the desperation of Vladimir Putin, and sadly, I think it undermines any ability for the Cuban people to have a path forward.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson.
I used to start my day every day with cereal and fruit. And I wondered why I wasn't losing weight because I thought, I'm not eating that much, for heaven's sake. I eat a lot of fruit. I eat peanut butter and apples. Isn't that good for you? Then I started the Soda weight loss program, and I learned that I was doing it all wrong. And that weight loss, the majority of weight loss happens in the kitchen. It happens with your food choices. Yes, exercise is good, and we all should exercise, and I do now more since I lost 34 pounds on Soda weight loss. So if it's time, or if it was like me, if it was past time, today is the right day to learn more about Soda weight loss.
My daughter actually found it encouraging that she didn't have to go run 10 miles to lose the weight. Like 90% of your weight loss is going to be in the food you eat. When you eat it, how much you eat. They can help you figure all of that out at sodaweightloss.com. It helped my daughter lose 42 pounds, and they can help somebody in your family as well. Just go to sodaweightloss.com. It's spelled S-O-T-A. Think Tim and Amanda. Soda weight loss is state-of-the-art.
I've worked hard to get where I am. I don't cut corners. I see opportunity and make the most of it. And I'm celebrating that success in style by heading to Jerry Seiner Cadillac to get the car I've been working for. They have new XT4, 5, and 6 models in stock and the area's largest selection of certified pre-owned vehicles. I've put in the work, and I've earned the luxury that only comes with a Cadillac. If you have too, then it's time to visit Jerry Seiner and experience the Seiner difference.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
Hi friends, Dan the Laptop Man here from PC Laptops. I get a lot of emails from people all the time. Here's one. Dear Dan, I hear your talk about a lifetime service guarantee. Free? Really? Please help me avoid all your fine print and be honest about what free means. You understand that we should be very wary of a free offer. Signed, Skeptical. Hi, Skeptical. I remember 22 years ago when we started PC Laptops and our lifetime service guarantee, people thought it was too good to be true. Well, you know, after a decade, people started believing me a little bit. But you know, it's been 22 years of having the privilege to serve our friends and neighbors like you. Our lifetime service guarantee has become the most trusted warranty in the industry. You can get a brand new PC Laptops desktop computer, and they start at only $29 a month. Check us out at PCLaptops.com. That's PCLaptops.com. Here's to seeing you soon, skeptical.
Join the Utah Symphony for the greatest classical hits from the 1700s to today. Tickets start at $21. Get yours today at utahsymphony.org.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a Utah representative doesn't think members of Congress should get paid if they can't pass a budget. Second, the BYU Cougars travel to Kansas to play their first official Big 12 conference game. And third, a new smartphone app will allow drivers who've been pulled over by police to talk to the officer. Right now, 61 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Oh, all of the headlines have been focused on the shutdown showdown and all of the machinations that go along with that. A lot of fake fights and false choices, but there's also a lot of other important work that is happening on Capitol Hill that we're often missing in the process. So we want to hit both and all the issues. So we're going to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of the funding process. Members of Congress have gone home for the weekend, and really pleased to have joining us on the program Congressman Burgess Owens. And Burgess, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Boyd, and I'm looking forward to chatting with my friend.
All right, let's start with the shutdown showdown. I won't cue the ominous music or the gravelly voice guy, but just give us some perspective. Where are we in all this?
Okay, well, let's kind of start off, first of all, thanking the American people. We're in this position we're in right now to show transparency, to have the conversation we're having right now, the impeachment inquiry, all these things only because of five seats. And those 5 seats came from blue districts. This used to be Biden districts, California, New York. So overall, we have done a remarkable job. It's a miracle, I believe, that we're in the position that we are to finally begin to legislate, to kind of show the vision, and to bring to the American people the education of what we should be doing in D.C. So that being said, we obviously have a deadline in this month. We thought we had kind of come to a point where we can possibly get through one of our appropriations, the DOD appropriations. We fell 5 short. We have 5 of my colleagues who decided to vote with the Democrats to not allow us to come to vote. And this is where we have to start kind of about how can we pull this together. And the big part of this is focusing on what we're there to do. We're not there to message anymore. At the end of the day, we now are no longer in the minority. We're in the majority. When we're in the minority, there's something called message votes. You know you're not going to win. You know that it's not going to get so far, but you do it so that the base knows at least you can hear them. We're now in a majority. We need to start legislating and progressively get back our country the way the progressives have taken away our country and our freedoms. Yeah. And we can do that by coming together, knowing that we have a very diverse conference. We have very strong conservatives that in blue districts have to work very, very hard to nuance their votes, but yet they're coming together with some of our stronger conservatives in red districts, the Freedom Caucus, and we've come together and actually compromised to get to where 98% of us are pushing forward to not only what's called a continuing resolution, but also putting some of our appropriations in place so we can go into this new year in a really good place.
Yeah, and I want to get to some of those things that are happening there. You were selected to serve as a conferee and a negotiator on the House-Senate Conference Committee to reconcile the bicameral differences in that National Defense Authorization Act. Give us just a little perspective there, because to me that's, again, we're not getting a lot of coverage on that, but to me that's the hard work and heavy lifting that actually matters in Congress.
It does, and I deem it an honor, to be honest with you, to be part of that conferee. What it comes down to is once we pass things in the House and then the Senate passes their bill, we come together and figure out how to make sure that we can come to that point we can actually push it through and make it law and codify it. So this will be my first opportunity to being part of this remarkable group of men and women, but I look forward to it. And I'm thankful to be honest with you, that we have, we're talking about defense particularly, that we have someone here in Utah representing the Hill and those other, our National Guard. Those kind of things are really very important here for us here in Utah. And I'm glad to be sitting at the table to be able to stand and give a voice to those great men, women, and women that actually, service as well as they do and protect our country.
Yeah, it's such an important thing, especially here in the state of Utah, and to have not just someone at the table, but someone with a voice at the table is real crucial. And so I think that's important work. And we're going to continue to watch and monitor that as that moves ahead. And your role in that reconciliation process, that negotiations between the House and the Senate will be really important and really impactful here in the state of Utah. There was also a hearing this week with the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and you had the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, there for a hearing. Give us some sense in terms of what you were looking for in that hearing and what you actually got.
Well, what we're looking for when it comes down to the Biden administration is not a lot of movement on their side. There's a lot of noise, but they have an agenda, and that doesn't matter what it is that we're trying to get answers for, whether it be the border, whether it be what's happening in transportation. They come with their talking points, and our goal really is just to ask the right questions so American people really see how ineffective they are in getting the words out, and really how disingenuous and how dishonest they are in so many different ways. Well, my goal very simply in my conversation was when we have right now 4 carriers that represent 80% of the industry. And there's a couple of the small ones trying to come together so they can be part of this competition, bring down the prices, give our customers and consumers options. He could not quite understand how pulling together smaller groups is not considered the same as kind of merger as the bigger 80% that they're going to 80%. So those are the kind of things that we have to get through. It shows that they're not really tuned into what the free market looks like. They truly are about pushing down their agenda as bureaucrats to those of us trying to figure out the best way to provide a service and make a profit. And I think this hearing kind of showed that out for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting. So many of the things in terms of supply chain breakdowns, some of the impacts of energy policies, and we can all say, yep, we're for cleaner, greener, and sustainable. That's all awesome, and we have to be able to do that because currently electric vehicles are running on coal-fired plants. In terms of that electricity, batteries are coming out of places like China and Africa. Yeah. And it seems to be we're missing a lot of the conversation of let's really look at it in a complete 360 all points of the compass view, which again would give us the transparency, the competition that you're describing. Yeah. And that's a different conversation.
Well, can I say this also, Boyd? And this is why it's so important to recognize the change of the last 7 to 8 months. We have only been and held the gavel for around that 8 months, and yet we're now having conversations and American people being educated in such a different way, because as long as Democrats controlled the gavel, all this stuff was being hidden. We had no idea that everything was going towards China. We had no idea that the Chinese, the communist China was infiltrating our school systems. We had no idea of what's going on the border and what the flooding, the invasion we have coming through with no sense of caring about the American people. Now that we have the gavel, we don't just show up to the border and do a TV op. We can actually have hearings and bring people accountable for what's going on. So part of this is very simply we have basic constitutional tenets as a party: faith, family, the free market, and education. And we're now able to show that we have an administration that hates faith, family, the free market, and education. And so we're going to show that difference and allow American people to decide how we move forward. And I have faith that we'll get back on track and start putting our freedoms back to where they belong, to we the people.
Representative Burgess Owens represents Utah's 4th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. Representative Owens, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Boyd. All the best, my friend. Take care.
All right, Representative Burgess Owens, obviously a lot going on in Washington, and it's not just all centered in the shutdown showdown and that part of the debate. That's a critical part. It's something that has to be done before we get to the end of the month, and I suspect things will start to take shape as we get into the week next week when members of Congress return to Washington, D.C., and the clock will really be ticking at that point. I think we'll start to see some movement on that front. But I think it's also important some of the things that Representative Owens talked about in terms of this Defense Authorization Act, the bill that has to be done there to fund the military. And it is a very good thing for the state of Utah that Representative Owens is on there representing that Boys Hill Air Force Base, our National Guard and Reserves, and so on. Real important conversation for the country, real important conversation for us right here in the state of Utah. Also making sure we get to the transparency on everything from transportation to energy. There are great conversations, and there are conversations to be had that aren't just the partisan things from the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans. A lot of this committee work actually exposes something that we don't see or hear very often, and that is that there are some really good conversations, that there might be differences in terms of application and how the program rolls out, but there are some common principles, I think, that we can get to, and a lot of times those committee hearings can showcase that if it's not just the performative kind that always happens in front of the cameras. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. Much more coming up on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Police were justified in opening fire on a corrections employee back in November, according to Salt Lake County District Attorney Sim Gill.
This was a long, drawn-out process. He had threatened at least 2 civilians with the handgun, ostensibly, and he had failed to stop on 3 occasions. And when he jumped out with the handgun in his hand.
The shooting followed a police call from a woman saying she was being held hostage. That led to a chase in South Jordan. The suspect, Zachary Alvarenga, was killed. A police canine named Maya was also killed. The OSIRIS-REx space mission went out and sampled an asteroid a couple of years ago, and the capsule with that sample is set to return to Earth on Sunday. It'll land on the Utah Test and Training Range in Utah's West Desert. Scientists hope to learn more about the origin of the solar system from it. You can watch it on NASA's live stream. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. President Biden announced the creation of a new White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention today. Among other things, it'll coordinate support for survivors and lobby for laws meant to prevent gun violence.
We're going to centralize, accelerate, and intensify our work to save more lives more quickly. That's why this new White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention is what it's designed to do.
And Vice President Kamala Harris, a former prosecutor, has been asked to head up the new office. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day at the close of trading, 106 points today. The NASDAQ down, though, just 12 points, and the S&P 500 down just under 10 points. Our KSL weather, we're cruising toward a sunny weekend. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
Imagine how inconvenient your life would be without power. No lights, no refrigeration, no heating or cooling, and no electronics. But with a Generac home standby generator, you'll have the power when you need it most. Generac generators automatically provide backup after sensing a power outage, so your life goes on uninterrupted. Schedule a free quote today with Genco Generators, your premier Generac service dealer in Utah. Call 801-295-0872 or online at gencogenerators.net.
Happy 62nd birthday, Granddad.
Thanks, sweetheart.
I got you this.
A mug. Oh, thank you. What does it say? Beware. If you are 60 or older, you may be at increased risk of hospitalization from RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, compared to adults younger than 60.
Not all dangers come with warning labels. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about getting vaccinated against RSV today. Learn more at bewareofrsv.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Hi, this is Doug Wright here with another experiment you can try at home regarding water. You can take 4 bags of water softener salt. Lift 3 of the bags with one hand and 1 bag with your other hand. Yeah, I know. Now, if you're like most people, you'll probably find that 3 bags of salt weigh about 3 times as much as the 1 bag of salt. And that's an important thing to bear in mind when you're shopping for a water softener. You see, in our home, we have Kinetico, and the Kinetico water softeners are so well designed, they use only 1 bag of salt for every 3 bags that other water softeners use. Now, I can speak to this because we have had a Kinetico soft water system now in 2 different homes, and I'm not a fan of lifting those bags of salt. This is just one of the many reasons you really should look into Kinetico. Their number is 801-576-8600 or go to softwaterutah.com.
Hey guys, do you know what makes Revive Men's Health Salt Lake City different? You. Every Revive treatment and medication is personalized just for you. Revive has the experts that guys go to when their current treatment isn't working. They have a complicated medical condition, or they're just not happy with their daily performance. Since 2011, they've helped thousands of local men suffering with the symptoms of low T and ED. Their goal is simple: to get to the bottom of your issues and fix them. Your best performance requires more than generic ED medications or a low-dose testosterone booster at a low-ball price like you find online. Revive medications are custom compounded, affordable, and guaranteed to resolve your issues. Stop dealing with the symptoms of low T or ED. Book your T-check and exam today. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit us at revivemenshealth.com.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A crash in the final cleanup stages eastbound I-80 in Parleys. This is about a mile east of Lambs Canyon, over to the left. Also starting to see a little bit of heavy and slow traffic southbound I-15 at the south interchange to 7200 south. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, and wildlife, along with excellent dining and shopping await you. Find out more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, showers are done, at least the ones that were down in the valley. Up in the mountains, we're still looking at a little rain. But we'll dry out through the weekend with highs in the 70s and overnight lows drop into the 40s. Warm and sunny for Monday and Tuesday. And right now, we're at 61 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Many of the headlines this week have been focused on President Zelensky's whirlwind tour here in the United States. Of course, he began by speaking to the UN General Assembly, gave a powerful speech completely in English. Went on to speak to the Security Council in a much more focused, detailed, step-by-step process in terms of what needed to happen as Ukraine continues to fight for their freedom and sovereignty as a nation against Russian aggression. He met with President Biden in the White House. He met with members of Congress. But beyond all of those headlines, there actually was a headline that connects to us right here in the state of Utah. Utah Aerospace and Defense Association signed a historic agreement with Ukraine, with the Ministry of Strategic Industries for Ukraine. And helping us break all of that down, we're really thrilled to have joining us back on the program once again Aaron Starks, who is, of course, the president and CEO of the Utah Aerospace and Defense Association. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hey, Boyd. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So give us some perspective on this. It wasn't the headline that everybody was chasing all week long as it related to Ukraine, but this is a big one both for the Ukrainian government and for the state of Utah. Tell us about it.
Well, thank you. We're celebrating this partnership that we've now formalized with Ukraine, and as you mentioned, it's specifically with the Ministry for Strategic Industries. Here's the context on it. In May, we took a delegation of defense companies back to Ukraine. It was an opportunity for the very strong and robust aerospace and defense industry in Utah to connect with buyers, partners, investors in Ukraine. As we all know, they're focused on winning the war, but beyond that, they're looking to rebuild their country. And that includes revitalizing and reinvesting in their security systems and defense weaponry. Utah boasts a very strong, active network of aerospace and defense companies. In fact, it accounts for about 20% of the state's economy when you factor in the military installations like the NSA and Hill Air Force Base. And so this MOU is an opportunity for us to announce a partnership, formalize it in a non-binding way by saying, hey, look, we see you, Ukraine, and we're going to prioritize you as a market, and we're going to do all that we can to advocate for your success by sending more companies, products, technologies, and services your way.
And so let's unpack that just a little bit in terms of what that actually means in terms of that framework for those critical industries. Talk to us first part in terms of kind of the military side. We know there's some manufacturing opportunities in Ukraine. We'll come back to that, but let's start with some of those things like you mentioned, the armored vehicles and others. What else is all included in that?
It's interesting. When we left in May, each ministry that we met with, the Ministry of Defense, Strategic Affairs, strategic industries, et cetera, they all presented us with a list and they said, hey, we need the following items. And so since May, we've come back and we've worked with well over 100 companies here throughout the state who manufacture various technologies and items needed by each of those ministries. And as you said, Boyd, there's similarities amongst the list, but as you compare them side by side, there's also differences. There's PPE requirements, ambulances, armored vehicle manufacturers, drone technologies, artillery, et cetera. And a lot of Utah companies are able to provide what the Ukrainians need. So, in a coming date, here by the end of the year, we will, again, take a cohort of about 25 companies from Utah back to Ukraine, where we bind up B2B meetings with the League of Defense Companies there in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, but also with the 8th Special Operations Forces there in Ukraine and each of their ministries. And that's our opportunity to report back and say, hey, here's what you requested. Here are the companies that can now start doing business with you. And by the way, we've had several companies see very, very good success, in Ukraine already.
That's great, and that is important both on the military front in terms of Ukraine being able to defend themselves and pursue freedom that way. I want to get into some of the manufacturing opportunities in Ukraine. For some of those Utah companies, we always talk about Utah becoming this crossroads to the world. This is a clear manifestation of that. And this is also part of something else that you mentioned, Aaron, that I wanted to get to, and that is this isn't just the military part of all of this. This is also the Ukrainian government saying, hey, we've got to rebuild our country, and we got to have relationships and partners in order to really do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, and I actually admire the brilliance in the strategy, but they're not even focused on winning the war as much as they are developing the economy. Their message to the world is this: we're winning, and it's only a matter of time before Russia folds. So you have an opportunity now to get in and invest in a country that's rebuilding its future. And by the way, they would tell you they want to build the world's smartest country known. And I'm sure Saudi Arabia loves to hear that, but you can see it by all the foreign direct investment being poured in. They're developing and redeveloping some of their digital networks, their cyber strategy. They're actually very sophisticated in terms of technology. And so, as you said, Utah is the crossroads of the world. We're always punching above our weight. We speak 138 languages, more languages per capita than any state in the country. This is what we do here in the great state of Utah. We partner bilaterally with markets throughout the world, and in the process, we strengthen our own economy.
Yeah, and then finally, before I let you go, Aaron, give us a sense of what we should be watching for. You mentioned this next delegation going over some time before the end of the year. What are some of the other things that we should be watching for, some of the impact of this memorandum of understanding between Utah Aerospace and Defense and the Ministry for Strategic Industries of Ukraine?
Having the MOU signed gives us a lot of momentum going back into the country, and it also is a signal to Ukraine to now prioritize our visits on an ongoing basis. And so we expect more success from this upcoming visit than we did the first. Obviously, that first trip was meant for us to plant some seeds. Now we get to see the harvest, and this is going to be a lot of fun. We have great companies doing various things within the economy here, so expect more. I'd love to come back on and report back on success and pray for our safety along the way. It's still wartime there in the country, and we're very aware of that.
Yeah, fantastic. Great perspective as always, and we will hold you to that, Aaron. Aaron Starks is the president and CEO of Utah Aerospace and Defense Association. Again, the announcement this week that the Utah Aerospace and Defense Association has signed a historic agreement with the Ministry for Strategic Industries of Ukraine. This is important. This is a big deal. And Aaron, we appreciate you coming on and breaking it down for us today.
Have a great day, Boyd. Thanks.
All right. Again, that's Aaron Starks from the Utah Aerospace and Defense Association. And we'll step aside for one last break. We'll come back with some final thoughts on a Friday here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Are you or someone you take care of as their caregiver living with Alzheimer's disease? This study just might be for you. Consider participating in a Atheris clinical trial exploring a novel repair and regenerative approach to Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City is looking for people with mild to moderate dementia, 55 to 85 years old. A consistent caregiver or support person is necessary for the conduct of this study. This study is a late-stage clinical study of an investigational drug for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research has over 30 years' experience with clinical trials. They conduct their business with professionalism, efficiency, and integrity. Contact Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City today. Again, call Pantheon Clinical Research today at 385-281-0550. That's 385-281-0550. Or go to pantheonclinical.com. That's pantheonclinical.com.
Ron had a tax problem he just couldn't handle on his own.
I owed the IRS taxes for over 5 years, but I didn't have any money to pay the taxes.
Those years cost him dearly.
Most of it was fees and interest. It was horrible.
Ron finally called in the pros.
I called Optima Tax Relief, and boy, am I happy I did.
The leading tax resolution firm, Optima, is A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau. They've resolved over $1 billion for their clients. Ron was overjoyed.
They settled my account with IRS. I was ecstatic. They are a lifesaver. They are. I am so happy.
Take Ron's advice and call Optima now for a free consultation.
Yeah, don't do like I did and wait. Call Optima Tax Relief. Do it now. You'll be ecstatic like me.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
How pain turned an avid outdoorsman into a frustrated indoorsman. Meet Ron.
I was always active. Fishing, swimming, hiking.
Until his flat feet brought it all to a grinding halt.
It is sharp pain shooting up your leg to your back.
And the pain was just the beginning.
When you're hurting, you can't move. So I ended up being a couch potato, and my health declined.
Fortunately, Ron had someone in his corner.
My wife said, that's it. I'm going to take you to the Good Feet store,
where he was personally fitted for arch supports.
I took one step. There was no back pain. I took another step, no knee pain. And after my second step, I went into my Good Feet dance.
Today, he's grateful to be back in the great outdoors.
I feel like a new person, thanks to the Good Feet store.
See for yourself how arch supports can help you.
Stop by the Good Feet store in Farmington, Riverton, or Sandy for a free fitting. Call 1-800-NEW-FEET or visit mygoodfeet.com.
They say you slow down as you get older, and it's true. But taking life a little slower here at Summit Vista has been incredibly rewarding. At my age, I know what I like, and it's all here. They call this a life plan community, and I'm liking the concept. I've always been a practical person, and now it's time to treat myself. At Summit Vista, I have a beautiful apartment. It's spacious and contemporary. It feels like me. I have all the independence I want, no more maintenance headaches, no more days spent cleaning. I eat delicious meals with my friends. The staff here feels like family. The socializing and amenities are endless. Frankly, anyone who says luxury living is overrated hasn't been to Summit Vista. I've rebooted my life, and I'm revisiting my younger self with the wisdom of an older woman. And I gotta tell you, feels pretty cool.
Experience retirement living at the top. Visit summitvista.com today.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Mom and Dad used to argue about everything, especially about Dad's drinking. It drove me crazy. It got so bad, I couldn't do my homework. I couldn't concentrate. I absolutely refused to let any of my friends come to our house for any reason. I would have been humiliated if anyone found out how much my dad drank and how loud my mom screamed at him. My family went from totally crazy to quiet, calm, and even peaceful. The only thing that happened is my mom started going to Al-Anon family groups. Her relationship with my dad really changed. I asked Mom if she would take me to her Al-Anon meetings or to Alateen. I wanted to see if I could have a better relationship with my dad. I'm sure glad I did. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn in an Al-Anon or Alateen family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-ALANON or go to alanon.org.
Question: what will you find on all over-the-counter or OTC medicine packages to help you choose the right drug and use it safely? The answer: the Drug Facts label. This label lists the medicine's active ingredients and purpose, how much to take, and warnings you should know before using it. Remember, even OTC medicines you buy without a prescription can cause side effects you don't want. So follow the information listed on the Drug Facts label. For more information, visit fda.gov/drug facts label. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a Utah representative doesn't think members of Congress should get paid if they can't pass a budget. Second, the BYU Cougars travel to Kansas to play their first official Big 12 conference game. And third, a new smartphone app will allow drivers who've been pulled over by police to talk to the officer. Right now, 61 degrees, mostly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson, and as we round out the program today, of course, a lot of the drama that's going on in our nation's capital, a lot of anger, fear, and frustration being served up as we careen our way towards the end of the month, which, of course, is the date when Congress has to either get something passed in both the House and the Senate and get it to the president's desk to fund the government, or the government will shut down. And, of course, there's ramifications to that, short-term and long-term. And the interesting thing that we have been discussing today, we had a fantastic conversation with Sam Abrams. And Sam is always a great one to give us perspective as it relates to trust and what's going on with Gen Z in particular. But to tee all that up, it's one of those things where you have to kind of, I always called it the flat forehead society in Washington, D.C., the number of times you just have to slap your forehead and say, you've got to be kidding me. It can't be this hard, or we can't be this soul-focused on our politics that we can't do the right thing. And because it all undermines trust. So yesterday, as the clock ticked along, as September 30th, yes, it's coming. It comes every year. And yesterday, mid-afternoon, Washington, D.C. time, the leaders in the House and the leaders in the Senate told all of their members, you're excused. You can go home. So for all the hand-wringing, for all the we're in a crisis, a potential catastrophe, and whatever you want to throw in there, the leaders of both parties in both the House and the Senate said, yeah, go ahead. It's Thursday afternoon. The jet fumes from Reagan International Airport are kind of wafting their way across the Potomac over here to the Capitol building, and we think you can go home for the weekend. Now, let me tell you why that undermines trust. One, the fact that our leaders, so-called leaders in this country, would say, we know we only have a few more days until we hit a crucial deadline. We're not in a hurry. So we're just going to go home for the weekend. But think about the message that it sends to the rest of the world in terms of how serious we are about actually governing and being effective in our government institutions. The other subtle message that most people are missing, many are calling out Congress for going home, but there's another message there. And that message is that the leaders of both parties in the House and the Senate are all too happy to have their members go home. Why? So that the four of them can negotiate a deal. So here we are once again, not with 435 members of Congress and 100 senators debating, amending, voting on a real crucial part of our government, but instead we have four people and some staffers behind closed doors, crafting something that will be thousands of pages long. And I promise you, on Monday afternoon, when all of those members of Congress fly back into Washington Reagan and make their way to the Capitol, they'll be told, here's the deal. This is the only thing we can get done. And your only choice is to either vote for this or we're going to have to shut down the government. And nobody wants that. So that further undermines trust, because it's not the people that we elected making the decisions. It's four people crafting a deal that they think is good. So that's part of the problem, because they're not following the process. When we follow the process in government, we usually get to the right result. And it's a result that whether you love the result or hate the result, you can at least trust the result and say, okay, let's see how that plays out. And then you can hold people accountable for whether or not it worked and delivered the right result. So going back to our conversation with Sam Abrams earlier on in the show today, and if you missed that, you're going to want to go back and check it out at kslpodcast.com later on this afternoon when that goes up. We talked about how Gen Z just has zero trust. They just don't trust the institutions anymore. And Sam rightly pointed out, they've never seen it work the right way. Gen Z, again, those born between 1997 and 2011, roughly in that space, they haven't seen government work right. They haven't had leaders on either side of the political aisle who instilled trust. So, of course, they don't have confidence. Of course, they don't trust the institutions of government. Most of them have little to no trust. And then, of course, that starts to spill over, because if you don't trust Congress, you're not likely to trust the president. If you don't trust the president, you're not likely to trust the Supreme Court. Everything gets polarized and politicized. And then we wonder why nobody trusts what's going on. And we wonder why we go into those tribal modes, because that's what you do when you don't have trust. When you're isolated, Sam Abrams pointed this out. When you're isolated and alone, you go to the tribe, and you don't trust anybody. And so it further undermines any ability to foster trust, develop trust, work towards compromise and solutions under the integrity of compromise. So instead, we just shout at each other across the chasm rather than having a space to build a bridge. You cannot build a bridge by driving a wedge. And the only thing happening in Washington, D.C. this week has been a whole lot of wedge driving, solidified by the leaders of both parties in the House and in the Senate telling their members, you can go home. Just go home. Don't worry about it. We'll see you on Monday. Have a nice long weekend. Watch a few football games. Get out and enjoy the fall weather. Check out the leaves. Come back on Monday when the clock will really be ticking. And then we'll present something to you that will be a false choice. That you either have to fund everything or you have to shut down the government and all the negative consequences that go with that. So we shouldn't be surprised, again, especially that Gen Z in particular has zero trust, because they haven't seen what it looks like. And one of the things that Sam Abrams told us earlier in the show